Hi, welcome to Pawpaw's Workshop. Today is part 2, building the drawers for the bathroom vanity. These drawers are very simple construction, and the methods I'm going to show you today makes it where it's almost foolproof from making errors. Let's get started. The first step in building these drawers is to put this spacer in. And what this is a 3/4 inch piece of plywood that is flush with the face frame. This is going to be used to be able to hold the drawer roller on. And I did this on both sides of the opening for the drawer. And then the other drawer opening on the far side, on the right hand side, I did the same thing. Again, that is going to hold the drawer rollers, and it has to be flush. The center section didn't need it because it's going to have a false front on it. The next step is to confirm the opening. This is 4.5 inches tall, and as far as the width, it is going to be 15 and 15/16 of an inch. The drawer fronts themselves will be 3/4 of an inch added to those measurements. I also measured the center section and did the same thing, added 3/4 of an inch. Now onto the table saw to cut the faces of the drawers. The width that I need to make with adding the 3/4 of an inch is going to be 5 1/4. With that set, I'm going to go ahead and cut enough of the stock to be able to make the two drawer fronts and the center piece. The material that I'm using for the drawer fronts is the same as I used for the face frame. It is a select pine, so it's completely knot free. The next thing I'm going to do is just cut the length of the drawer faces, and again I'm adding 3/4 of an inch to my measurements. So the opening was 15 and 15/16, and I'm adding a 3/4 of an inch for the drawers. And I did the same thing for the center section, adding the 3/4 of an inch to the opening size. With all three pieces of the drawer fronts cut, I'm just going to set these aside for now, and I'll work on them later. What I'll be doing is just cutting a decorative edge around the outside of these face frames, and they will be completed. For the drawer sides, I'm taking some material, as usual, scraps that I have in my scrap bin, and cutting enough material here to be able to do the drawer size. Now this is 3/4 inch material, and what I'm going to do is cut enough stock to length, and then I'm going to take it over to the planer and plane it down to my 1/2 inch thick. At the planer, I went ahead and set up the thickness that I needed, and what I wanted to be able to do is cut at about a 32nd of an inch off at a time. Making several passes made it where it was a very smooth cut and did not have any tear out. As I was cutting by stock, I would also take the calipers and measure periodically just to double check the thickness. Remember, I want to be able to get this to a 1/2 inch thick. After a few passes, I'm done. The next thing to do is I want to show you just how easy it is to cut the proper length of these drawer sides. The opening itself is 15 and 15/16, and the height is 4.5 inches. So what I'm doing is just sketching in my drawer. The drawer has to be a 1/2 inch on each side smaller, so in essence 1 inch less. So the drawer itself is going to be 14 and 15/16, and I cut that width. The next measurement is how tall should that drawer be. Well, the opening is 4.5 inches, and that should be an inch smaller as well. So 4.5 inches less 1 inch, and that's going to be 3.5 inches. Now with those two measurements, that takes care of the front and the back. So now how long should it be? Well, it should be 18 inches, and that's only because I'm using a drawer roller that's 18 inches. So back at the table saw now, I'm taking my 1/2 inch stock, and I'm going to cut it to the 3.5 inches for the height of my drawers. Now the first thing I'm going to do is just trim up the edge so it's nice and square, and then I'm going to cut all of my sides to 18 inches. Now set up a stop block so that each and every piece that I cut will be exactly the same. Making drawers this way is the absolute simplest way to be able to do it. It makes it where you can be very, very accurate with the process and have a perfect fit every time. After all the sides were cut to the 18 inches, I just changed my fence down to the 14 and 15/16, and I cut all of the fronts and backs. A quick measure back at the cabinet itself shows that my front piece is actually 1 inch less. Perfect. Now I'm going to lower the blade down to be able to cut half the thickness and do my rabbet cut. To get the proper width of my rabbet cut, I'm actually using the side of the drawer to be able to use as a gauge, and that's being set up next to a stop block. So once the saw is set, I'll do one test cut just to verify, and then I'll be able to cut all the drawer fronts and backs. Okay, I have the proper measurement now, so I'm going to go ahead and take a series of cuts, just a small little bite at a time, to be able to cut the rabbet. This is not a large enough project for, in my mind, to be able to set up the dado blades. Just cutting a little bit at a time, takes several passes, and it's done. Now that this first rabbet joint is completed, alright, let's take a look at this. I've got the rabbet joint here that we just cut, and this is the side of the drawer. And I put it in position, and you can see that the joint fits perfectly. I think this is going to work out well. Now I'm going to go ahead and cut the remaining pieces. The next step in the process is to cut the groove that will hold the drawer bottom, which is the plywood insert. Now what I've done is moved the fence over to where it's 1/4 inch from the blade, and I lowered the blade where it'll cut halfway through the material. I'll run all the pieces through once, and then I'll actually move the fence over just a little bit to be able to make a second pass to be able to have the proper width to be able to accept the plywood bottom. With the calipers again, what I did is measure the plywood to be able to see the thickness of it, and then I moved the fence over the appropriate amount, made a couple of test cuts, then I was able to go ahead and run all the pieces through at the proper width. I wanted to show you a close-up of what it looks like. That is the groove in place. That's actually set up to be a 0.20, and I'm going to grab the calipers and show you the quick measurement here of being 0.20 of an inch, and that will accept the plywood that I have. You can also see the dado that was in the picture, and that's the completed front. Now it's time to cut the plywood bottoms, and I'm using a 4x8 sheet. And to be able to cut this by myself, I'm using the router table as an outfeed table to support the length of the plywood. And I'm cutting this 18 inches, the same exact width as the drawer sides. Again, this is a very simple process to be able to make these drawers. With the tables that I have in place, it easily supports the plywood. The next step was to grab the drawer front, measure it to get the proper size that I needed for the width of my drawer bottom. And then I went to the table saw, reset up the fence, and made my cuts for my two bottoms. I went ahead and just put it together for a dry fit to test everything, and it looks good. So I'm going to go ahead and glue and nail it now. To be able to glue this together, I'm putting the glue on the two surfaces of the rabbet joint to be able to hold these drawer sides in place. It's not necessary, in fact you do not want to put glue in that groove. You want the plywood bottom to be able to have some room to be able to move. Now then, the next step is just go ahead and slide the plywood into its groove. And again, there's no glue in this. And then from there, I'll go ahead and attach the side piece. Then next, I'll take the other side piece and go ahead and add that piece in. And it slips right into place. And the last thing I do is I'll take the top and go ahead and add the glue to it in the same way as I did before. Okay, with the glue added to each end, I'll go ahead and put that into place. This one's a little bit more tricky, but it does slide in pretty easy. And with both sides in place, and I want to make sure that it's pushed down, and then I'll go ahead and use a 1-inch nail, and I'm going to shoot that in place. And I'll do that on both sides. The next thing I did in the process was add a couple of clamps just to hold it in place while the glue dried. I took the drawers over to the router table and put a 1/4-inch round over bit. And what I wanted to do is round over this top edge of the drawer on the outside. Then I moved the router table fence out of the way, and I went ahead and cut on the inside to do the round over on the inside of the drawer. Putting on the drawer rollers is actually very straightforward. This is the front of my drawer, and the roller actually goes on to the back side. So you line it up to the front edge, and then I'm going to take a little scratch awl, and I'm going to mark the centers, and that's where it's going to screw in. And all it takes is 3 screws to be able to secure this. So with that done, I'm going to go ahead and position the screws and screw it in. And I'm going to do the same thing for the other side. In setting up for the drawer roller that goes inside, this measurement right here is from the front edge back to where the drawer roller begins is actually 2 millimeters. So that's where it's going to be sitting. And again, we're going to make sure that this is level, and we'll screw this in now on each side. And that's where it's going to be positioned. So I'm going to go ahead and mark this off camera and screw it in place. Okay, it's time to test out the drawers. Just slip it right in there. Perfect. Can't get any better than that. Now it's time to get back to the drawer fronts themselves. I put in an OG bit into the router, and I'm cutting the drawer fronts now. And you always want to cut the end grain first. What that does is help prevent tear out on the wood. And here's the drawer front completed. Want to give a close-up so you can see the detail and how nice that this wood cuts. Hi everyone, thank you for watching my video today. If you like the video, please go ahead and hit the subscribe button down below and the little bell next to it so you'll be notified on the different videos that I upload. Also check out the videos over here to be able to stay up to date on the happenings in my shop. So again, thank you for watching my videos.